We begin every show with a myth-busting segment where we look at some of the foundation myths of the conservative education reform movement. Some of the things that they talk about, they're facts and ideas that tend to be inaccurate. Sometimes they're downright lies, but they're repeated so often by their very well-funded astroturf groups and by the media who picks them up that they sound like they're the truth. Well, today, rather than going into a new myth to bust, I'm going to pay homage to really the best education myth buster around, a woman by the name of Diane Ravitch. And she has a new book out, which is called Reign of Error. She also has co-founded a group recently, which is called the Network for Public Education, and has become a gathering place and a clearinghouse for people like me, actually, who see education as more about preparing students than for high-stake tests and for picking winners and losers. Now, Diane Ravitch has a very interesting history. She began in the 60s as an education scholar and a historian. She's written a number of books and a number of articles, and she was a moderately progressive educator. She believed basically in kind of a holistic education, that you have to educate the whole child, not just the basics, but art, literature, history, the whole thing. And she also believed that you don't have quick fixes. You don't have fads. These things don't work. You have to have a good, solid, basic education. And a funny thing happened, though. Around 1989, when the first George Bush took office as president, the Secretary of Education, Bush's Secretary of Education, invited Diane Ravitch to join him as an Assistant Secretary of Educational Research. And she reluctantly agreed. Well, she was working in the Bush administration. She was rubbing elbows with the conservative education reformers of the time. And you know what? She, like everybody, was frustrated with the slow movement of education, and so many students weren't doing as well as she wanted. And she began to be seduced by some of the ideas, some of the quick fixes that came from the education reform movement. So here she was pretty soon advocating for school choice, advocating for charters, advocating for merit pay, accountability, closing failing schools, all the business-minded approach to education, all those invisible hand of the marketplace ideas where somehow free enterprise will sort things out and come up with the best education possible. And that continued. That continued through the Bush years, through the Clinton years, and even through the middle of the second George Bush's No Child Left Behind. She was part of the groups that were actually working with those ideas. But then she started looking at the results. And she began to realize, you know, she's a scholar, she's looking at what's actually happening, that the results she hoped to happen weren't happening. And she felt that the whole school choice movement and the whole high-stakes testing movement that came along with No Child Left Behind was destructive. And then in 2010, she published a book about her change of heart, her experiences, and then her change of heart, which is called The Death and Life of the Great American School System: How Testing and Choice Are Undermining Education. Soon she became one of the strongest opponents of the conservative education reform movement that she had embraced. She began writing on a blog as well as her book, which was very popular, by the way. She was airing her thoughts on the blog. She was also bringing in articles and other people writing there. And soon she co-founded, and this was just a year or two ago, she co-founded a group called the Network for Public Education. I strongly recommend, if any of you want to know what's going on in progressive education and also want to know what's going on in the conservative education reform movement, go to Facebook if you're a Facebook user, look up Network for Public Education, like the page, and you'll get all kinds of information about articles, or go to their website for Network for Public Education and sign up for their email blast, and you'll get stuff from all over the country, including, I'm proud to say, some of the blog posts that I write, which turn up on Network for Public Education. Well, Ravitch put out a new book this September, and the book is named Reign of Error: The Hoax of the Privatization Movement and the Danger to America's Public Schools. It's a very, very readable book. There are no frills in it, no jargon, plenty of history and facts. Anyone can read it, and she backs up her assertions beautifully. Now, the first half of the book are short chapters that are basically what we do in this segment, which are myth busting. So, for instance, One of the chapters is titled "The Facts About Test Scores." The claim is that test scores are falling and the educational system is broken and obsolete, but the reality, test scores are at their highest point ever recorded. And then there's another chapter, how poverty affects academic achievement, and the claim is that poverty is an excuse for ineffective teaching and failing schools, while the reality, as she points out very clearly, is poverty is very highly correlated with low academic achievement. Lots of chapters like this, wonderful, clear, concise. The second half of the book, she comes up with common sense suggestions for ways to improve education. No quick fixes, no easy magic bullets, reasonably expensive, reasonable society-based and education-based, school-based solutions that are proven and research-based. For instance, there should be better prenatal care. Let's have fewer premature babies. Let's have healthy babies born. After they're born, let's give them the best infant care possible so we have healthy children who grow well. They're going to be better suited for school. Once they're preschool age, give them preschool. Universal preschool, but with trained professional teachers, not with babysitters from the community, but trained teachers who understand educational theory, know how to move kids forward. Let's have small class sizes, she says, especially in the early grades. Let's have testing, but make the testing focused to measure skills and progress, not this constant high-stakes testing. And she says this about schools. Every school should have a full, balanced, and rich curriculum, including the arts, science, history, literature, civics, geography, foreign languages, mathematics, and physical education. I recommend the book very highly, and I recommend that if you want to read the book or not, that you go to the Network for Public Education and sign up to find out the wonderful stuff that's being talked about in education across the country.
I agree, Dave. You know, Diane Ravitch absolutely nails it. And I think that anybody who cares about public education should read her book and become very educated about what is actually going on, because I don't think the vast majority of Americans, of Arizonans, understand sort of the backstory of what's actually happening in our education system. They see schools closing all around them, but they don't understand why that's happening. They see states slashing their budgets for neighborhood schools, and not always for charter schools. They don't understand why that's happening. And she really explains this in a lot of detail. And what I find especially interesting are the corporate benefactors who are behind the privatization movement. I definitely don't think that people understand how Wall Street is connected to this movement as well. So I highly recommend it as well.
Read the book, folks. There's a lot in there.
Yes.